Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I would like to welcome every one of you, but my excitement is very big because Candy agreed to speak to our group, and I would like to welcome her to joining us tonight and speaking about her experiences, about her books, and her amazing journey she's on. So let me read a little bio I have of Candy. So to kind of remind you, I know you got all the copies, but I would like to have this for the purpose of this recording, to have it all in one place. So Candy's life changed in August 2013 during a 10-minute drive to work. She began receiving messages from the world of spirit. She transformed from psychologist to a psychic, from skeptic to a believer during that morning commute. Her training as a psychologist could not explain what had happened, but her curiosity begged for answers. We all know that. Message by message, she reluctantly, that's why the reluctant messenger came from the title, followed this mystical breadcrumbs down a path which resulted in extraordinary adventures into the unknown. Her international award-winning first book, The Reluctant Messenger, was published in June 2018. She describes herself as an ordinary person whose extraordinary adventures into the unknown changed her life forever, I'm sure. The book chronicles her expedition across a vast expanse of universal consciousness that led to a new truths about life that she thought she had known so well. Her second book, The Reluctant Messenger Returns, was published last year, 2020, in May. This book describes her adventures into angelic realm, including miracles, sacred geometry, which that was very interesting, surprising reasons behind the life review process, and face-to-face meeting with angels. She sold over 10,000 copies across the globe, and both of her books have reached the bestseller on Amazon, #1 bestseller on Amazon. And more of her informations are available on her website at candicesandersons.com. And we can also put this in a chat. I can put your website, and here the floor is your, Candy. Welcome again. And I'm very, very happy that you could join us today and share your life's path.
Well, Gosia, thank you so much. It's really good to be here. And what I really love is that this is a group with Monroe people, or people who are interested in Monroe. So anytime I get a chance to talk to someone who has some kind of association with Monroe Institute, it's like I am at home. You know, I feel right there. Now, you say, which is so true, back in 2013, during a 10-minute drive to work, my life changed. And it did. And it's all due to Monroe Institute. So let me tell you how it happened. First of all, it was before sunrise. I'm on the road. I'm in Southwest Florida, and the sun doesn't come up till like 7 o'clock. So this was before sunrise. I was taking my short drive to work. It's great. There's no traffic this time of day. My car, I was certainly driving, but I felt like my car was on automatic pilot. I'm really sitting back, just running through the day's schedule in my head. I had all these back-to-back meetings, no breaks. And my biggest concern that morning was, how could I squeeze in enough time to eat lunch? So nothing unusual was on my mind. But little did I know that something was about to happen to me, something that changed my life forever. You see, out of the blue, this thought just dropped into my awareness. And I thought, what is this? Because right away, I knew that this was not a thought from me. It was more like a thought for me. And it wasn't just a thought, it was more like a couple paragraphs, but it was talking about a flower. And the message said, when you look at a flower, it's at its peak when it opens. And then they said that the flower is a flower. So taking the word flower and hyphenating it, it is a flower of energy. The message said a plant draws energy deep within Mother Earth, and then it ascends toward Father Sky. And when it's in perfect alignment with Source, it produces this flower. The message then said that humans too can be flowers of energy. So if we are grounded, if we're connected to the greater good, we can flow, we can just reach our greatest potential. Now, when I got this message, I didn't know what to think of it. The words, the vocabulary, even the phrasing, Gosia, it was not mine. I knew it wasn't. I didn't use terms like source. I didn't even use Father Sky and Mother Earth back then. I do now, but I didn't back then. So it's like, what was this? Now, let's look at who I was. That was Candice 1.0. I'm Candice 2.0 now. And of course, my name's Candy. My website is Candice. It makes me sound more grown up, I guess. So, but anyway, you've got to realize who I was back then. I was grounded. I was down to earth, an ordinary person, a psychologist. I lived in a very materialistic world. If I couldn't measure something with my physical senses, so in other words, if I couldn't hear it, smell it, touch it, feel it, I left out something, see it, then it didn't exist, because science was my religion. All of my training as a psychologist kicked in at this moment when I heard this message. And all of my training taught me to look at what's wrong. So I did. My first thought was, what's wrong with me? Why am I getting this message that's so specific? Now, I didn't hear it with my ears. It was telepathic, but the words were very specific. So I'm thinking, okay, have I become psychotic? My heart was actually pounding in my chest, but in my head, I'm running through the criteria for psychosis in the DSM-5. The DSM-5 is the diagnostic manual of disorders that we use to diagnose mental conditions. And then it's like, okay, I took a deep breath and I thought, no, I'm oriented to time, place, and person. I'm not psychotic. Yet I couldn't explain what had happened. So what did I do? I did what many of us do when we have something that's new, a puzzling situation. I dismissed it. I didn't even think about it. Well, that's not uncommon. When we meet up or confronted with something that's novel, something that's never happened to us before, we don't have any information from which to work. We have no data files stored in our brain that tell us how to respond or how to process. There's no directions on when this happens, and now you do this. So here I am, operating with no background experience, nothing to guide me. It's like searching in the dark. So it's much easier to bring in denial, that defense mechanism. And it's perfect because it helps us resist what we don't know or we don't want to see or deal with. And that's exactly what I did. So instead of realizing that this was a significant event, possibly one of the most significant events of my life, I just dismissed it. You know, after all, I had much more important things to do, like get to work an hour early. I'm one of those people, if I am at work on time, I'm late. I have to be there early. So I'm getting to work early. A few minutes later, I pull into the empty parking lot. I gather all of my stuff. I head toward the building. But all of a sudden, I am distracted. Something stopped me dead in my tracks. I still remember, it's like I just turned to the right, I think even in slow motion, and I saw it. I was face to face with a tree a tree. I was looking at a royal poinciana tree. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with the royal poinciana, it's like a mimosa tree. It's got a big trunk, gnarly trunk, really wide spreading branches. The leaves look like ferns. They're very delicate, very, very tiny, very pretty. And it blooms. There's different colors. This one was like a red orange one. And the blossoms on a royal poinciana tree look like orchids. They are absolutely beautiful. So when I looked at this tree, I realized something was different. I mean, I had passed this tree 100 times before. I just passed it, walked, unlocked the door, walked in. This time the tree actually called to me. It's like it beckoned me. So I walked to this tree, this beautiful tree that has this gorgeous canopy. It was stunning. I started looking at it. The sun was just starting to come up and light started to filter in through those beautiful leaves. And when it did, I looked on the ground and there was this gorgeous pattern of light in dark, just dancing on the ground as the tree would just sway in the wind. It was mesmerizing. And I stood there, here we go, gazing at that tree. Oh, I should have warned you all. I speak from the heart. And when I tell this story, I get back into the same energy field. And so the tears come. I'm not apologizing. I'm just saying, okay, so here we go. But I looked at this tree with awe, with wonder. Here I was alone with it. And I had the oddest and most inspiring thought. I wasn't alone. This was not just a living tree. This was a sentient being. It was as much alive as I was. I stood there. Time seemed to stop as I just soaked in this tree's beauty. I don't even think I was breathing. I was suspended in a space where time didn't exist. Yet, while I'm there, I'm just frozen in this realm where time could not be measured. Yet I felt alive. I felt more alive than I'd ever felt in my life. Suddenly, my focus shifted to this tiny bud. It was this bud that had not opened, it had not flowered yet. And that message I had just heard a few minutes before, all my thoughts returned to some of those last words. Let us all be flowers of energy. And I realized that those doubts that I'd had about the message that I wanted to just dismiss, I realized that on some very deep yet undiscovered level, I knew I had been guided by a greater source. I'd been guided to this tree to see that unopened bud. I knew the unopened bud represented me. It represents all of us, potential. We are the flowers of energy, just waiting to bloom. After a few moments, which could have been seconds or could have been months, I couldn't tell. I got my keys, unlocked the side door of the building, and I went in. And I didn't know what had happened. I went in not knowing that the message and the experience with the tree would change me, not knowing that I had just taken my very first steps into the unseen world of spirit. And I would never be the same. My experience with the tree was mystical. it was the first, but not the last of a bunch of mystical events that now make up my new life. My ability now is to step into the world of spirit. Immediately, my professional training kicked in. I rushed to my office. I turned on, and back then I had a big, because this was 2013, I turned on my clunky desktop computer so I could document everything that happened. I knew that I had to preserve these events. I had to capture every word, every thought, every feeling. What I couldn't have known and didn't know at the time was that these steps were leading me farther and farther away from what had been my normal life. I began to realize that there were aspects about my life that I knew nothing about. I had not experienced them until that day. And all of this was new to me. I didn't have a clue what was going on. Here I was ready to dismiss a message about a flower as nonsense until that mystical experience with the tree. I could not ignore what had happened after that. Now I look back and I realize that my guides and angels must have been saying, quick, she didn't get it. What do we do? What do we do? And one of the guides said, bring in the tree. She can't ignore that. And that's like exactly what happened. But very soon after that, the floodgates opened. Now, back then I had not read a lot of books from people who channel. I've read several since then, but many of them seem to either channel one person or one group of people. Not me. I am all over the place. I have so many messages, so many messengers. So this floodgate opened, started with people who had crossed over. And they had these beautiful messages that they wanted me to share with their loved ones. I thought, okay. Then this was followed by all sorts of messengers, star beings, religious icons from Buddhism, Christianity, Native American culture. I connected with angels, guides, ascended masters. I learned to view the world through the lens of energy. Then, and if we have time, I'm going to go into this tonight. It was like I was in classes and I would get lessons. I learned about time and how time works. I'd learned lessons about vibrations and frequencies. I got tips on how to live life more fully. And the last chapter, I even got a glimpse of creation, which is like unbelievable. Can you imagine that? It didn't take me long to get into a routine. I realized that drive to work was perfect. I was alert enough, paying attention to my driving, but without there being a lot of traffic, I really didn't have to focus. So I'm paying attention to the driving, kind of. Mainly it's the car on autopilot. But I was open enough and the messages started flowing. So what I would do each morning, I'd get in my car, buckle up, crank on the engine. I would get my iPhone and hit record on my voice memo app. And the words from the messengers would just flow. And that's exactly what they were, words, very specific words. Now, as I said earlier, they were telepathic. I didn't hear them with my physical ears, but they were so specific when they came into my awareness. It was as if I had heard them. The messengers told me what to say. It was just like dictation. If I made a mistake, they would say, strike that, followed by the correct word or wording. They told me what punctuation to use, when to start a new paragraph, and even how to spell and pronounce unfamiliar words. I knew when to use quotes. It was so simple. I know now that this is just energy that flows. Everything is energy. And I'd like to compare my connection to them, to the world of the non-physical, like water through a garden hose. When you first pick up a hose, a lot of times it's bent. There's a crimp in it. So when you turn on the water, it doesn't want to flow. But once the water starts to flow, that hose uncrimps. And that's what happened with me by setting the intention of getting in the car, opening up and just hitting record and saying anything that came to mind. It just opened up for all of these messages to flow into me, into my awareness. I would record these on my morning commute, but sometimes the messengers would actually arrive a little early. Like if I was in the shower, they didn't understand the concept of personal space. So I would say, not now, hold off, wait. And they would. Each evening I would come home and I would transcribe the dictation. And soon I had over 100 pages of typed messages, and many of them I could verify. It started with the people who had passed away. They gave me messages for their loved ones. And that was the first time it's like, oh, okay, now I can verify this. So I would, and luckily, at least initially, the messages that came in from those who had passed away were people that I knew. And so I could talk with them and because I knew the families, and they would say, oh yes, he always said that, or yes, she was just like that. So that was the first opportunity I had to start validating some of the messages. I realized later being a psychologist was actually perfect for me to receive the information. I was skeptical, so that's good. I was open because in my training, I learned to be an objective observer. So by just sitting back and observing, I didn't stop the information from flowing. I just allowed it to flow. And when I would get information on specific topics, I would make sure that I wouldn't immediately research it. Because sometimes, one topic might last for 3, 4, 5 days. I made sure that the topic was completed before I would research it, because otherwise I would feel like I would be making the information up, or if I got information that I just read, it's like, oh, of course they say that because you're making all this up. It's like, no. But that's how it began. Now, let's get to some Monroe stuff. Let's talk about why the messages began. That's actually a long story. It's you'll see in my second book, The Reluctant Messenger Returns, An Unexpected Adventure into the Angelic Realm. I go into that. Yes, there you go, Gosia, thank you. I go into that there, but I'm going to shorten this. But let me tell you where I was 2 weeks before that eventful commute to work. Monroe Institute, attending Lifeline. Now, let me do a disclaimer here. These are my opinions and not representative of Monroe Institute. That's something we always need to talk about.
You are so good, Candy. I keep forgetting.
I am. I am, which is perfect, actually, if you think about it, because I am a rule follower. So in my life, I had no rules that said, what do you do if someone from the other side starts connecting with you, or angels or star beings? It's like, oh, yikes, I don't know what to do. But I do follow the rules. But by being open, I just allowed things to occur. Now, for those who might be watching this later, or some of you all on this, today, let me just tell you briefly about Lifeline. Lifeline is a graduate level program, so you have to take a few programs before you get there. But what's great about all programs at Monroe, it's the frequencies of those binaural beats and their other sound technology that take you to where you need to be. I always call it the lazy person's way of meditating. You don't have to do anything, you just have to think about when's your next meal coming. But the frequencies will take you somewhere. With Lifeline, we were told to assist newcomers. Newcomers were souls who had recently passed to the other side. And we were supposed to help them complete their final journey. We were supposed to get them to the park, or Focus 27. In my language, where I grew up with a Christian background, I called it heaven. But Bob Monroe, luckily, you know, he's so wise. He was so wise. He stayed away from New Age language, woo-woo language. He stayed away from religious terminology, and he really used scientific labels. So we were going to Focus 27. Now, think about it. Well, first of all, there's a couple theories on what you're actually doing in Lifeline. Are you actually retrieving souls who have passed away and helping them transition? Or are you retrieving aspects of yourself? Maybe we're doing both, but that was something that's like very interesting. But either way, I can't think of a more selfless service than to help someone in their final transition. I mean, think about it. But did I attend the program for that? No, no, not at all. The only reason I went to Lifeline was it was a prerequisite for another program I wanted to attend. I didn't care whether I retrieved anyone, but you know what? That may have been key to what happened, because I did not enter the program with expectations. I didn't have any desire to do the retrieval work. You know, once again, are we really retrieving people who have died or parts of us? I don't know. I didn't really care. But I'll never forget that first exercise. In the first exercise, we only try to retrieve one person, and then we all come back and we regroup. I'm in my check unit, and that stands for Controlled Holistic Environmental Chamber. It looks like a bed on a train, a berth on a train, where you can lie down on like a single mattress, and you can close this curtain, and it's perfectly dark. You have headphones so you can listen to the sound technology. There's no distractions. So here I am, it's dark, no distractions, listening to the exercise. And the voice over the headphone tells us, you know, find someone who needs help with your transition. So nothing happened. It's like, okay, that doesn't surprise me. You know, back then, I really liked this kind of spiritual stuff, but I wasn't good at it, not even too sure I believed it. Other people were great, but no, not me. I'm just an ordinary person. So still, I waited and nothing happened. Now, for reasons I cannot explain, I know now, but I couldn't then, I reached outside of my check unit and I fumbled for my iPhone, and I opened it up, hit record on my app, and all of a sudden, I spoke a man's first and last names. Now, because we're recording, I'm not going to say his name. Then came Topeka, Kansas. I've never even been to Kansas before. And then a place, well, not a place, I don't know what it was, but next came a word that was Jackson. Now, that certainly could have been a first name or a last name or a middle name, but I knew it wasn't a name. I don't know why or how I knew it. I just knew it wasn't a name. It was not a family name. I thought, I have no idea what's going on, but I just went with it. And literally my thought was, isn't this funny how your mind just invents things? So the exercise ended and we were all called to gather together to debrief our findings. Had my phone already in my hand, so I Googled the man's name, and as an afterthought, I put obituary in the search bar. Oh my gosh. Within seconds, there he was, first and last name, his death notice. I could not believe it. Not only did I get his name correct and his city and state, a detail that I didn't realize until later when I was actually researching him again to include this story in my book, he had passed away exactly 3 months before. to the day of the retrieval. For some reason, having it that specific was an eye-opener for me, and it was just more validation. Then I saw the name Jackson. Guess what? I was right. It was not a family name. It was his place of business. Then something else from the online death notice just like jumped out at me. And this was new information. It wasn't anything I had picked up on, but it was more important than anything I had already read. This man was a psychologist. A psychologist. And all of a sudden, it's like the bell started ringing, and I realized this makes perfect sense. This new information was like the glue that solidified all the other pieces. It brought the full picture into view. We both shared the energy of psychologists. That is why we connected. So on a level that I really wasn't prepared to fully understand at the time, this was the first time I realized energy, sharing the same energy frequency, made our connection possible. Now, after this first exercise, I'm thinking, whoa, what's going on here? I retrieved many others. And sometimes I got first and last names. Sometimes I got first, middle, and last names. I got cities and states. I had someone from Oklahoma City. I had someone from upper state New York. I had someone from, I would just I can't say all over. They were all from the US. But it was just amazing, all this verification that I got later. And they were all newcomers. They had all passed away within just a couple weeks or months, except for one man who had passed away a year ago to the date. So once again, here's a little another anniversary coming in there. After a while, because they ask you, the trainers say, get information, get, name, rank, and serial number, get whatever information you can so that you can verify your findings. But as the program progressed, I stopped asking for verifiable data. I didn't need it. Instead, I started gathering groups of people, and I would bring groups of people with me to Focus 27. What happened in Lifeline, it was a game changer for me. It changed me from believer to knower, but I did not realize it at the time. It's like the foundations of my belief system crumbled before me, and it shifted everything I knew. It shifted my current existence, and I realized everything I had known about life, I didn't know. All of a sudden, that became very murky and unclear. And I realized how much I really didn't know. And as these underpinnings of what had been my life shifted, I reemerged from the rubble, changed, transformed. I didn't know it until a couple of weeks later when I was driving to work early one morning, the story that I just shared. But what happened is I no longer believed these things. I knew them to be true. So when I reached that tipping point and no longer, when my beliefs became knowns, I changed. So there's a lot more to the story, but I discovered, that I discovered later, but that's for my next visit here. But what are the takeaways? First of all, one takeaway was don't set expectations unless, if you're going to a program at Monroe, for example, or some other place, unless let's just be open. Have the expectation of, let's just see what happens. I learned to absolutely go with the flow. Remember that water in a garden hose. If I have an expectation that this is going to happen, this is going to happen, it's going to happen this way, when something else is presented to me, I won't even see it. So instead, let that information just start to trickle through and accept it and open, and more will come. Whatever happens, it just happens. Just relax. When you all do your meetings and you listen to something, you know, HemiSync or whatever from Monroe, just wait and see what happens. Let me tell you one story. I don't know, Gosia, if you've ever used the Visit before, if you've ever shared that CD.
I've done it. I'm not sure. We've done so many. I'm not sure if we did the Visit. If so,
Well,
some time ago.
Okay, the Visit is something that it's a really good one to fall back on. I mean, I've used it so many times when I would have meetings, and it's voiced in Bob's voice, which I love to hear him talk. And there's all this really cool, it might be a little corny, but I think it's cool background. You know, you're walking and you're walking on gravel, and you can
we have done it. Yeah. I thought
Yes.
that this maybe is this one when you actually hear like people walking, like, yeah, we've done it.
But I love it. So I had done that probably 15 times. Wow. And then we decided to use it again. So this is my point I'm going to make about no expectations, just go with the flow. Well, when you get to, you know, you go through this cave and then there's a big door and there's a light shining underneath and you go in and, well, eventually you see this great big shaft of light and you wait and you see who appears there. Well, I've always had like, oh, you know, maybe a guide or this or nothing, or, you know, I'll fall asleep or whatever. Well, one time, oh my goodness, my husband drops in. Now, he passed away many, many years ago. He had just turned 35. This is way back in the 1980s. And he had a baby in his arms. And it's just like, oh my gosh, it's like, Daryl, what are you doing here? Now, my daughter was pregnant with her first child, Lorelei, who is now 9 years old. So this is, you know, that many years ago. And she didn't even know the gender of the baby yet. And it's like, but I got to see her. And her hair was light brown, little wavy. So he was holding her like an infant, but she was like maybe 18 months old or so. And it's like, oh my goodness, look at that smile. I said, oh, she has Cassie's smile. And Daryl said, no, she doesn't. She's got mine. And then I remembered he had the most beautiful dimples. And it was his smile and his sense of humor that attracted me to him. And so here he is holding his granddaughter. And he actually got to hold her before we did, before Cassie even knew that she was a girl. And it was such a profound experience. I came home that night. I mean, I think it was the next day, and I called Cassie and I said, oh, I know what you're having. You're having a girl. And I told her the whole story. And, you know, she's not too sure whether she believes all this or not. But like 2 weeks later, when she went to have her ultrasound, she called me up. She said, Mom, you ruined the surprise. Well, she was kidding, of course. And I said, well, of course it's a girl. That's what I saw. The same thing happened with Shalane, who just turned 5 years old. And that's a huge story that I can't really go into now, but he was instrumental with her actually through something with Monroe, with some healing that took place on Cassie's part. But don't set expectations. My expectation of seeing the Visit again was, okay, I'm going to have the same experience I always have. Whatever happens, happens. But sometimes a little door opens just wide enough for that magic to filter in. And that's what happened with the Visit. I loved it. It was just a beautiful experience. Now,
priceless too. I mean,
it was. would you all like to hear about time? Because the messengers have showed me how time works, and it was something I didn't know about.
Sure, of course. Anything you have for
Okay.
us will be priceless. And I'm glad that you already invited yourself over again, because we obviously have a lot to cover.
Okay, good. Okay, time. Well, I used to think of time as a straight line from point A to point B. I have a little, if this doesn't blow away. I have some pictures here. I've got a fan on since my air conditioning went out. From point A to point B. Okay.
Yeah, we can see it very well.
It's straight. It's one direction. And see those little circles in the center?
Yes.
That represents us. That's our awareness, our point of existence. So we start here, and they're numbered. We're going. Let's say we're going to Grandma's house. We start here at 1, and then we move to 2, and then we on and on and on and on. It's linear. It goes in one direction. That's time. Messenger said, no. Time is more fluid than that. It is a straight line, only in your dimension. It is actually a curvy sine wave. Okay, so this is really time, and we're still on that line, moving 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But what we see is all of a sudden that trip to Grandma's gets a little more complicated. It's not so straightforward. Now, I want to introduce something that they call the POE, point of existence. Your point of existence, and that's what's depicted on the little circles in these lines. Your point of existence is where your awareness is. And for most of us, our awareness is inside our bodies. Most of us think we are our physical bodies because it's like, oh yeah, that's me. That's who I am. I'm me. I'm right here. Well, suppose you pick up a hammer and you drop it on your toe. Where is your POE? Your point of existence goes directly to your toe. Normally it's like around your heart or in your gut, but you know exactly where it is when you drop something on your toe. That's where it is. Well, the messengers have showed me that we can expand our POE. We can expand from a small, from a dot or a small circle to a much larger circle. So it looks like this. So no longer are we just this little dot or this small circle. As we expand our awareness through meditation, through prayer, through just allowing ourselves to move away from our physical body, like what we do during sleep and during dreams, our point of existence gets much larger. So looking again at this, but now I want you to imagine that that large circle is three-dimensional. It's a globe. So we've got this round ball, three-dimensional ball. And as time goes like this, look how much of that time wave that we've encompassed now when we've expanded our awareness. This is why some people, psychics, for example, can tap into the future or tap into the past. If you really expand your awareness, you can, this timeline really collapses and you can register past lives, which is so funny because I didn't believe in reincarnation or past lives, but I've gotten so many messages. It's like, oh yeah, of course there is. It's just common sense to me now. They actually showed me how a near-death experience occurs. And I have, if this is where we were, our first POE, when you have an NDE, and you can have an NDE without actually being close to death. Like if you're in a car accident, people will say, oh, I saw my body from above and, I looked down. Well, what happens, well, whether it's close to an NDE or a true NDE, your awareness catapults out. So all of a sudden, that little dot that you were, that was inside you, is so huge and so expansive. And you have moved all the way to the upper edges of that point of existence. You're all the way out there. And so when you turn around and look, you see your physical bodies. And that's what the messenger said. And I thought, oh, that makes perfect sense. Now, one question is, how do we get there? How do we do this? The messengers have told me time and time again, it is through the heart. The heart is actually a portal to the non-physical world, of energy, to where our spirit guides and our angels reside. And we can all get there. Again, the easy way is to use meditation like through Monroe Institute, because the frequencies will take you there. But we do it naturally in our dream state as well too. But what happens is we pull our awareness. We don't pull it, we allow our awareness to leave through our heart. And we end up being in this beautiful field of energy that surrounds us. And that beautiful field of energy is actually more real than our three-dimensional lives. I mean, I had defined my entire life by the material world. If I couldn't measure something with my physical senses, it didn't exist. But when I had that first experience with the Royal Poinciana tree, and I stepped into that larger field of energy, and I realized that tree was just as alive as I was, time stopped for me. And that's one of the keys that you know that you've reached that other field of awareness, is when you have there are no time parameters. You could have been there a week, 2 weeks, 2 years. It doesn't matter. It's all the same. You become part of all that is. I start this book out, The Reluctant Messenger, with a quote from Nikola Tesla. And it says, if you want to know the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. And that is so true. So many of the experiences that I've had, I mean, I visited a place called the Realms of Light, where I met Buddha and Jesus and Kuan Yin. I never heard the name Kuan Yin, and I had to look her up, and then I realized, oh, there really is someone named Kuan Yin. I mean, she is like the Buddhist counterpart to Mother Mary in the Catholic religion. I have been to so many places. I can actually travel now almost just at will into the cosmos. I have been out, like, and this sounds so bizarre because it was bizarre for me, but it's like, no, you can really do this. But I have been in places where I've zoomed past constellations and planets, and I've melted into all that there is. I realize we are all one. I've heard people say that before, and it's like, yeah, right. But when you start to experience it, and your awareness melts into anything and everything, you realize how important and how significant you are. It is so easy to think of ourselves as insignificant. You look at the huge universe, and the Earth is just like one grain of sand, and we're so tiny. How could we mean anything? What I've heard, what I've been told is we are part of a great machine of consciousness. And if you think you're not important, we're like cogs and bolts in that machine. And if you think you're not important, try to remove a screw or a bolt or something from any machine and see what happens. It breaks down. It takes all parts working together to bring that machine to life. And that's what we do. We are here on earth to learn lessons, and we've been given lots of opportunities to do that. As we realize that we are not our physical bodies, we are energy. I realized all this other stuff isn't really woo-woo or psychic. It's just physics. We connect to energy, just like Tesla said. We become entrained to the frequencies that are right outside our bodies, as long as we allow ourselves to go and experience it. And anyway, I'm probably at a stopping point now, but it's all Monroe that just did this for me. It was wonderful.
That's amazing. I mean, you hear how people's life changes because, you know, at a certain time in their life, usually a lot of times is something really profound happening to people that you start, you know, you are like being struck by a lightning in some ways.
Yeah.
And, you know, you do have to like change your direction because you have no other choice, because you no longer believe of how you were leading your life before. So, you know, it's just truly amazing. Like you said in your books, like you never had a idea of writing any books. You never were thinking of yourself as any author and that you will write anything. It was just, you were just guided to do that and share it
Yeah.
with others. I mean, how many people, you know, who have gifts like that or experience that? Because in some ways we all have those gifts, they're just not awakened because we didn't go
Right.
through something, you know, maybe we are not in the right point or right, you know, things, you know, we are not aligned, we are not in that frequency that we are allowing things to happen.
But you know what? The subtitle here is, in my book, is An Ordinary Person's Extraordinary Journey into the Unknown. If this could happen to me, it could happen to anyone. I realize now, actually, I didn't realize it. I was doing a podcast with someone and they said, "Oh, do you realize being a psychologist, you were the perfect candidate because you were objective and all this?" And I'm going, "Oh, no, I hadn't realized it." But quite often, when I hear of people who have had these wonderful experiences, when you listen to their background, they'll say, "Oh, yeah, you know, I had invisible friends when I was 2 years old. I used to see my grandma who had passed, or my whole family was psychic, and I've always been gifted this way." And it's like, no, not me. I've always been interested. I mean, I think these things are fascinating, but I never had any experience with it until one day I did. And when I started on that drive back in August, you know, back in 2013, I was in my 60s. Okay. So it's never too late. You know, I didn't start with this as I was, you know, in elementary school. No, I'm in my 60s. So it can happen to anyone, but just allowing it. Now, messengers have told me that our earth is going through a transition. And in one of my chapters called Cosmic Contacts, they talk about that. Like one group that came in was a group from Chiron. Never heard that word before in my life. I saw in my mind's eye that it was spelled Chiron, but I heard that it was pronounced Chiron. And they said they were sending energy to their sister star, our sun, and helping with Earth and helping to change her vibrations. And I'm thinking, yeah. So I look it up afterwards and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, there really is something called Chiron, spelled that way and pronounced that way. It's actually a hybrid. It's like part comet, part planet, part something else. I don't know, but asteroid. But it's like, just that in itself just blew me away. But what they're saying is Earth, as she goes through this transition, the veil between these dimensions is thinning. And so people like me who hadn't been open before are opening. So the time is right if you want to do this, to just open up, ask for help, allow it, and just see what happens. And I would certainly recommend documenting. I keep a notebook with me at all times and I just jot things down. I mean, the other day I went to my first in-person meditation in 16 months at Church of Spiritual Light. And I talk about that church a lot in my books. They had a Reiki and crystal bowl ceremony. And once I was there like 40 minutes early, of course, and I'm just laying down and I'm already having these great experiences. And all of a sudden I found myself like zooming off into the cosmos. I went past galaxy after galaxy after galaxy. And then I heard chanting. I heard the word Malkut, Malkut, Malkut. Didn't know what that meant, but I came back. But when I wrote it down, because I'm journaling this, I wrote it as Malkuth, Malkuth, pronounced Malkuth. So Malkuth. I came back to Earth, and then it's like, okay, I'm here. I'm in the room. I'm laying down. Here, the bowls are playing, and then immediately my energy body started melting and melting, and I felt myself and my awareness going all the way through the layers of the Earth until I connected with the core of Earth. And it's like, whoa, what a cool experience. Not unusual, because I have experiences like that all the time now. When I got home, well, the next day when I looked it up, oh my goodness, Malkuth is pronounced that way, and it is spelled Malkuth, the way I wrote it. It is part of the Kabbalistic tree of life. It's one of the, I think it's Sephiro. I probably am not pronouncing that right, but it is the connector from the cosmos to Earth. It's a bridge that connects above and below. And I'm thinking, I couldn't have made that up. You know, I mean, I'm out in the cosmos. I hear the chanting that brings me back and then sends me to Earth. And what are they chanting? They're chanting the word that means bridging cosmos with Earth. So my point is, keep a journal, write things down. It may not make any sense, but it might make sense next week or 2 months from now. Same thing with the dream journal. Write your dreams down. You never know when they're going to come back, and it's like, oh, now I understand this crazy, bizarre dream really does have some significance.
That's amazing, and that's what I always believe too. I mean, some things that might not make any sense in vision, write it down, because down the road it could be really part of the puzzle. So yeah, that's great. Well, anybody has any questions for Candy? I know we have some people who always are interested in asking questions, and you can write them down if you're shy, or come up off mute and ask your question. Otherwise, we always have some other, subjects we can talk about. We see if anybody has anything to say. Everybody's shy.
Everybody's shy.
So in the meantime, when people are thinking maybe about questions, can you maybe tap a little bit on, we know that your life changed. You start paying attention. Your awareness completely, like widen and, gradually. Yes. And, when I was reading your books, it's like, I was like, oh my gosh, how cool it is. And I remember that was after your first book that I was thinking, I want to be like Candy. Maybe I can channel something. And actually it happened when you sent in, like I always say, of importance of intention. And yeah, you can be open-minded, but it's always good if you have like, don't make up an intention when you don't believe, but when you have an intention, I mean, it's always very helpful because it gives you some kind of focus.
A focus point.
That was like in 2019, after reading your book, we have a canyon to go through to get to our mountain town, and it's for me it's very therapeutic. And you know, you need to focus because it's very curvy. And one time I just had that message. I usually listen to some audiobooks, or I listen to music, and the voice in my head said, you know, no music today or no something. I'm like, okay, well, I turn my audio off. And then I the whole entire time I channel my friend's grandma who passed, and she was with me, and she just was visiting for our wedding. Actually, we had anniversary 2 days ago, and she came from Poland, and she wrote a book about her grandma, and I got this like whole download of messages for her. And again, it's like with you, like with the past ones, because they connected because you knew the people, right? Yes. So I just got a complete download of informations for her. I just was completely in awe because I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm Candy. Because it just happened at the first try. So it's just like, it does really can happen if you like it's not like if you really, really want it, you might prevent yourself because the warning is too strong. But if you just set an intention and be open, I think magic can happen. So I see some messages here, so we check to it, but I will let you answer that.
But I mean, that's perfect. You allowed it, and it just happened. Let me tell you another little story. Something I didn't share. I mean, that if I had not shared, I would not have known how significant it was. So once you start getting information, and you can start validating it, then you realize, oh, this is real. Because quite often, when the messages come in, they're using our vocabulary. So it sounds familiar. So we think we're making it up. Right. In my case, in the one about the flower, no, they weren't using my, I didn't use words like source and that kind of stuff back then. So it's like, I know that's not from me, but quite often they will. So it's easy to just discount and think, oh no, I'm just making that up. But the first time I went to Church of Spiritual Light for their Reiki and crystal bowls, I didn't know what to expect. I went there with 2 other people. We were laying down. They had the bowls in the center of the room. And then they have 2 Reiki practitioners that walk around, and do Reiki, which of course is energy healing. They don't touch the body. They just work above it and work on an energy field. And when I walked in, they had music playing in the background, and they started fading the music so that the bowls could take over. And as she was fading the music, all of a sudden I heard drum beat. And to this day, I don't know whether there was really drum beats or not in that music. I suspect there wasn't. And then I got a message that said, it's the heartbeat of Grandfather Sky or something like that. And I'm thinking, okay, here we go. So I started writing it down. And I saw in my mind's eye at the top of the room, a portal open, a vortex. It's like a tiny tornado spinning. And in came this group of Native Americans that went in the back of the room and circled the room. And I heard, no, I didn't hear it. I actually just knew that they were the ancestors. Then came another group, smaller in number. They were the wisdom keepers. They were the tribe of the council of elders. And then in came angels that just made me cry. It was just beautiful. And they all turned and faced the center of the room. And then out came this white buffalo calf. It was knobby-kneed, pure white, pink around like the ears and around the rims of the eye. His eyes were white. I mean, were milky white, milky blue, excuse me. And then I saw more action, and I thought like Big Mama Buffalo was going to come out. But no, this gorgeous Native American woman came out, and she gave this beautiful message about healing. Because after all, the Reiki and crystal bowls is all about healing. And she said you had to be like the buffalo, at the innocence of the child and the purity of the white, and all these beautiful, analogies to the buffalo. And that's what you need to do to be open and playful and just accepting. And that's what's required for miracles to occur. And I'm thinking, wow, that's like really cool. Well, when this was over, and I'd never been to this place before, the Reverend Bledsoe said, does anyone want to share? I mean, I had been channeling for like 2 years, but I never had anything like this. And I thought, all right, I better say something. So I just kind of read off my notes, and she was behind me, and the friends who came with me said her mouth just dropped open, her eyes got this big. And she said, have you ever been here before? And I said, no. She said, did you know that our church is based on the foundation of the medicine wheel? It's like, I don't even know what that means other than it's something Native American. I said, no. And she said, did you know that we have a crystal healing bed from Brazil in the back room? I said, no. And she said, that crystal bed is a portal. And I thought, oh, well, that's what I saw, this vortex, this portal opening. She said, to the left of the bed is a picture of
I have
white.
goosebumps because I know what you're gonna say.
She said, to the left of the picture, to the left of the bed is a picture of white buffalo calf woman. Now, I live in Naples, Florida. I'm from Paducah, Kentucky. I know nothing about Native culture. I had no idea who that was. She is an icon in the Lakota Sioux Nation. She's like their pipe keeper or whatever. I mean, she's just like, everyone knows her. I never heard of her. And I thought, oh, so that must have been the lady who came in with the white buffalo. And then she said, on the other side of the bed is a picture that Al painted. Now, there were 2 Reiki masters that night, Al and Linda. Al had painted a picture of the medicine wheel, which he had a portal in the center, surrounded by a tier of ancestors, a tier of the Council of Elders, and a tier of angels. It was
Wow.
like I had stepped into that picture. But here's the point I want to make. I came this close to never saying a word about that because it was too bizarre, even by my standards. But the messengers gave me a message about a tree, about a flower. Then they showed me a tree. And little by little, they moved me down this path. So I would eventually be able to step into all of these frequencies and pick up information like this. But they didn't do it all at once, just pushing the sides against the sides of my belief system till I could accept more and more. But if I never said a word, I would have never known how spot on I was. I ended up doing an entire chapter that begins with that, that event that I went to called Stampede, where I had all of this communication with white buffalo and like really, really cool things. So you may think you're making it up, and maybe you are, who knows? You may be picking up something in the future. You may be picking up a conversation or something, and you share it with someone and they say, I don't know what you're talking about. 2 days later, they're back in that room and it will happen. So be brave enough to just say, what if, what if this happened? What if this is true? I don't know why I'm getting this, but let me just share it with you. Take it for whatever it's worth. And, I'm not here to convince anyone of anything other than this is just my experience, and it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, you're having a lot of fun. And I remember when I told you after your first book that I cannot wait for your second book. And then it happened, even though you didn't plan at the time to have any second book. So you never know.
That's right.
So we got questions, Candy.
Okay,
actually,
all right. Yeah,
quite many of them. So
okay.
I will read them. So first question what came in was, how do you get into these places, the meditation, or do you just set your mind to it and it happens?
It started off, with me being in a meditative state. Okay. Now, I'm not meditating because, after all, I'm driving to work, but I was in a position where I was not focused on anything really significant. I mean, just driving to work. But I mean, there's no traffic. I mean, it really was safe, which actually a few years later, I was moved to another school that started later, and I was in traffic. It's like, no, there goes that channeling first thing in the morning. I couldn't do that. But being in a place where you're receptive and open, I lucked out that I'm driving to work, and they just decided that's the time to give me this information. But other than that, what works is going to a meditation, or again, using Monroe technology, where you let the signals take you there, and then you just allow it to happen. Now, Gosia, I like what you say about setting an intention, because that does focus. But there's a difference between intention and expectation.
Oh,
So
yeah, huge
I
difference.
I don't
Yes.
have an expectation of this is what's going to happen, but my focus is, maybe I'm going to just be open and see what happens, and just allow it. Get that piece of paper and start writing it, because that's like that water in the hose crimping. Once you start writing, it may flow. I see a message here about, do I get messages about future events or warnings? Well, it's interesting. You have to read the second book to find out. But what I realized, there were so many messages in the first book that were talking about, they would say, life as you know it will change. This is part of Earth's evolution. And once again, I'm thinking, yeah, great, evolution. So in 200, 400, 2000 years, it's going to change. No, they were talking about the changes that we're going through right now because of the pandemic. This has opened up a doorway, an opportunity for us to look inward and make changes on individual levels. And we can decide what frequency we want to connect with. We are all one. We are humanity. We are brothers and sisters linked across this globe. It's not us versus them. And my whole life has changed in the way that I see things. So yes, I received a lot of messages about what's going on in the future, but I didn't recognize it in real time.
Next message. What do messengers do for you on your personal level? Or is this for the general human beings, like the general public? Or what is your goal or mission that were you able to tap into it with your messengers?
Well, I don't really have a goal or a mission. It just happened to me. But the messenger's goal and their mission was for me to get the information out there. They're the ones who said, you're going to write a book. And I said, I don't think so. But, you know, I did. But a lot of the information that they give me is not just for me. I have had some personal things, like especially with my children, but it's humanity learning to step beyond the world of physicality, step beyond the world of materialism, and realize there are connections that we have to each other, and we can use those connections. We can deny them and think that's them, I'm me, we're separate. Or we can embrace that we as humanity are all one, and we can uplift each other. We can choose to use our energy wisely by sending love, having uplifting messages for everyone. I remember my mother used to say, you know, if you don't have anything kind to say, don't say anything at all. But it's like so true. Choose your energy and what you want to do with it, what you want to embrace. Do you want the energy of jealousy and anger or sadness? Or do you want the energy of forgiveness? Do you want the energy of kindness? we can choose our own frequencies, and that is that can make all the difference.
So true. The next two questions, I think, are kind of related. They're from two different people, but
Okay.
one is, and you can read that, that she finds it very frustrating to trust, and how do you trust this process? And also the second person just kind of feeds off that and says, how do you allow this process to happen to you?
I didn't actually allow it, it just happened. But when it happened, I didn't shut it down. I mean, initially it's like, what's going on? Am I crazy? Going through the DSM-5, it's like, okay, no, I'm not psychotic. And honestly, it's almost like, I don't know what this is. And so while I'm trying to figure out what it is, the message continued to flow. And then I thought, you know, that's kind of a cool message about a flower. It's pretty, it's poetic, it really makes a lot of sense. There's nothing wrong with that. And then now answering that first question, it took me a long time to trust, because I'm not going to just open up and then I get these messages and I'm going to trust it. I don't know who this is or where they're from, but the messengers did this step by step. First starting off with the flower and then the tree, which wowed me. Then messages from people who had passed away. And I started to verify those, as I said earlier. Oh, you know, you really did have a son named this who used to say that. And it's like, okay, this information is coming in from somewhere. And then I got information from star systems. One was, you know, the Chiron I mentioned. It's like, that's just crazy. What does that mean? I don't know what it means, you know. But when I researched it, it's like, oh my goodness, there really is a place called Chiron. I had a message from Alpha Centauri. And then when I looked them up, I realized, oh, I didn't know they're the closest star system to Earth. And they said they were watching out over us. So if there's going to be a star system watching out over us, it would make sense that it would have been the closest one. So little hints like that, it's like, okay. I got the information about time. And it's like, okay, well, that kind of makes sense. I can understand that. But message by message, I was pushing against my belief systems, and I was beginning to accept a little bit more information in. It didn't hurt me. It was interesting. Some of it I could verify. But what I didn't realize was, as I connected to these messengers, my energy body is actually in that same field with them. And I am changing. I was learning about those vibrations and frequencies, and it was altering me. For example, when people had passed away, I didn't just learn that there's some messages and I got some verifiable data. I learned more. There was one man who was very debilitated. He had a debilitating disease, and he told me he was living in perfection. On the other side, and he told me that he had chosen this life. So I started learning about sacred contracts, that we plan our lives before we come. Now, it took me a while to jump that far because I didn't even believe in reincarnation at the time. But these were just beautiful messages. I learned that when those are on the other side, they still care about us and they'll still connect with us. They're the same. They still have a sense of humor. But I was in their environment and I realized how profound of an effect it had on me. Everything that I knew about life changed. And now I feel like I straddle this world with one foot in the 3D world of the earth and the other in that energy realm, in that realm where we can connect to our loved ones who have gone, that have passed on before us. We can connect to our angels and our guides. We can connect to ascended masters and anything else that's energy. So I learned to trust, but I probably had 100 pages of typed messages before I would allow myself inch by inch to start trusting. And nothing has ever come into me that is negative. I've never gotten a message where I would be suspicious of it. Like, for example, if I got a message and this angel says, oh, go jump off a roof or something, it's like, no. You know, I mean, I wouldn't do that. I've never gotten those kind of messages. Everything has been very positive, very uplifting. And so over time, I just learned to trust. But it was a long, long journey learning to trust.
So nothing, as I say, happens overnight. I mean, you need to put a practice into it. It's just, it's not like you do meditations once a month and you think that something will happen. It can happen, you know, you can get some breadcrumbs, but then you need to practice. We have few more. Some are private some are messages for you, so maybe you can see. Steve actually met you in your church.
Oh,
so
I see that. Yes, Steve, I remember. That was so nice. Oh, right. Yeah, he came all the way to Florida. Wow, I remember that.
Actually, Steve and Scott and I been to one of the Monroe programs together. So I was excited when he could jump on your presentation today. So hello, Steve, and thank you for joining.
And come back when I come back.
see, we are connected.
I already volunteered to return.
Very good. As we see, this is like so much to cover.
Oh, wait, I've got to answer the last one. What is the significance of the cover of your book? Okay, I have two books. You all can see this large one. There's a beautiful, well, I think it's and that one's great. There's this great big keyhole, and I'm just standing, or someone depicting me is standing there, and the light comes through the mountains. Now, she's from Ireland, and so she didn't realize those weren't the Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia, but they're supposed to represent Monroe.
But they could be. They definitely could be.
Yes. But let me tell you about this one. When I was working on my book, I really wanted to make sure that I really wanted a special cover. So I contacted someone and to see if they could do the book cover. Online, they said they were like 6 months behind. So when I contacted them, they said, oh no, we've got to change that. We're more like 11 months or a year out. But he said, here's a link. Or he didn't see, he emailed me and he said, here's a link to a page, and they have a lot of people that are experienced book cover designers. I thought, great. I'm very methodical. I started going through each one of them. I probably spent 4 hours looking at each one. I knew what I wanted. I mean, because I knew you should have this aspect and this aspect and this aspect. I knew I couldn't do it. But after several hours, I gave up. I couldn't find anything. Went to bed. The next morning, I woke up and I thought, all right, Candy, let's just be logical. I opened it back up. I looked at the list, and there was no logic to the way they were listed. They were not alphabetical. So I scrolled all the way to the bottom and I got the last one. I clicked on it. And like, for example, two popular colors that work really well together, it's not in this one though, is blue and teal. And the first thing I saw was a blue and teal. I thought, oh, and everything this lady had done, I loved. So I contacted her the next day and I said, I would like to do this. I gave her a deposit. I gave her a couple paragraphs on what the book was about. I went off for a beach walk, came back in 30 minutes. She was finished. Not 11 months or 12 months, 30 minutes, and she was finished. And as I didn't know she was in Ireland, which really doesn't mean anything, but she said she started off with this quill. And she said, you may think this is strange, but she felt this presence in the room. And it took over as she was doing her graphic design. And she said it morphed into an angel wing. And you see this road with a person on it. That's me. And so this angel wing is writing the path of life. and there's the stars and birds. I mean, it's just beautiful. And it was, I wrote her back and I said, hey, you're this is exactly what the book is about. You know, I'm not surprised this happened to her. She had never had that happen before. Now, let me finish the story. Several weeks later, and I've become friends with her. She's just a dear, dear person. A few weeks later, she emailed me and she said, how did you find me? Well, I'm so organized. Instead of saying, oh, I saw you on this site, I went to that link and I was going to just send her the hot link so she could look at where I'd found it instead of just telling her. She's not on there.
Wow.
She's never been on there. Now, it's so interesting. When I started researching her,
I have goosebumps everywhere.
When I started researching her, I mean, I went on, she had a lot of YouTube channels, you know, with stuff that she's done, you know, book trailers. And I was realizing I was only like the third view or the fourth view, or maybe the sixth view on that one. It's like, wow, how do people not know about her? She's great. But I mean, this is spirit's way or energy's way or whatever word you want to use of pulling things together the way that they're meant to be. I was meant to find her, and I did not look at any other place because I already had a list of people. That is where I got her name, and she's never been there. But it was just another validation from spirit saying, this is where you need to be. It was a true coincidence. Now, a coincidence, many people think, is something that's haphazard, meaningless, just two things that happen together. But Wayne Dyer used to say, if you look at the word coincidence, the root word is coincide. And when two things coincide, they fit together perfectly. In geometry, two shapes that coincide are a perfect match. So this was a perfect match for me to find this lovely woman and for her to do my work. So that's the significance of the book. Isn't that a cool story?
This is a really cool story because I was always curious. I'm very happy that Dawn asked that question because, you know, it's just like, yeah, when I look at this, I don't see a wing. First, what I see is like a profile of a mask, you know, of like some kind of mask you can put over. So I wasn't sure if that is the messenger of the people walking is a messenger. So yeah, now when I see, it's like, yeah, I can see a very fancy wing. So yeah, that's very cool story. I'm glad you share it. Well, if there's no other question, I don't want to keep you that too long or anybody. So I would stop recording and then we can say goodbye after. So thank you very much, Candy, for gracing us with your presence and sharing your story. That was really priceless and wonderful. And I'm sure everybody will look a little differently on some messages they popped in their head. And it's not necessarily thinking it's just some kind of weird making it up thing. So thank you so much.